I'm Kypers, and I directed Jim's introduction to gender identity, also known as My Friend is Transgender, for AMAZE.org. When I was growing up, there weren't a whole lot of transgender or gender non-conforming representations in the media, and the few that were there, I appreciated, and I still appreciate that I had it, but most of it would probably be considered problematic by today's standards. For example, one of my gender non-conforming icons was the B-list horror movie director Ed Wood, who was famously a cross-dresser, and also famously died miserable and not the best role model. So when I was trying to figure out gender stuff, I mostly looked inward, and it came out through my artwork. The genesis of this story came from a short story that I wrote when I was in college, which was actually based off some people and situations from high school. When I began the collaboration with Amaze, I thought to adapt that short story because it was essentially two people arguing in a car. If it became one person trying to educate the other person, it could be educational without it seeming too forced. Like, the educational information could be delivered in an organic way and still not disrupt the story. There were a lot of changes that had to be made to adapt the short story to Amaze's audience. Glenda's name never even comes up in the original draft. It ends with Jim just kind of driving around, thinking to himself, and sort of coming to a place where he can begin to entertain the idea of empathizing with Cassie's unnamed friend, but he never actually has to see her. So for this version, it was important that Jim actually has to confront Glenda. Jim was a lot meaner in the original, so that had to be toned down, but also because the short story was in first person, he would say things that were completely horrible, but it would be immediately followed by an inner monologue saying, "I know I shouldn't have said that." So that was something that I tried to maintain in the new script for the animation, to show that Jim was more complicated and thoughtful than maybe the audience was giving him credit for. Jim has no idea what Glenda's internal life has been, but I also wanted to show that Jim had an internal life, that he was thoughtful, and he wasn't trying to be terrible, and he just was sometimes. There was a lot of back and forth between my producer, David Grandison Jr., and a subject matter expert from Amaze, Nora Gelprin, to make sure the script was educational, age-appropriate, and just a compelling script. The first step in animation is usually a storyboard. A storyboard is sort of like a comic strip version of the movie. Once we had the dialogue recorded and the music, I could take the storyboard drawings and put them in a timeline for the first watchable version of the film. That's called an Animatic. I did the voices of Jim and Glenda. My friend Kayla Miller did the voice of Cassie. Kayla's one of my closest friends. I've known them forever. The music was done by another close friend of mine, Jake Stanton. Jake also did some weird sound effects for the movie. There's a part that Jim is whining about something, and there's like a crying baby noise, because Jake told me, like, I do a really good baby noise. So...
Glenn Davis? I've known him since preschool.
I started figuring out the timing and number of drawings by doing the rough animation in a program called Flash. The final animation was all done on paper. I wanted to maintain an aesthetic that looked like doodles on school notes, like really crude but intimate. Once all of the animation was drawn and photographed, I could compile everything in a program called After Effects. Each character had a set of mouths used for the lip sync. My friend and animator Kofi Sarfo also worked on the lip sync. The response to the video has been really incredible. It's been selected and honored in national and international film festivals. I got to take my first overseas trip when it was in the Manchester Animation Festival. Hearing the responses from transgender kids and parents of transgender kids has been one of the most gratifying things in my life. I feel like I'm amazed by how far the culture has come. I cannot possibly imagine content like this existing when I was in middle school or high school, but I feel like, particularly for Amaze's audience of 10 to 14-year-olds, they're not thinking of this huge shift in the culture that has happened in the last 10, 20 years. So to them, I think with the temperature politics is at right now, it can really feel discouraging, and you can feel like nothing is changing, but things have changed a lot. There's every indication it's going to get better. Glenda's not in a situation where she can be who she is, and Jim doesn't understand what Glenda's going through or what it's like to be transgender. But by showing that Jim can change, I hope that encourages kids to believe that people can change. And if their parents don't understand them, their parents can learn. And if their friends or their teachers don't understand them, they can change too. I feel so grateful for having had the opportunity to make this film. Thank you for watching the video, and I hope you can share it with anyone that it might be helpful to. Love deeply, feel keenly.